Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I used to believe that when something breaks, you can fix it. That cracks don't mean the whole thing is doomed. They just mean you need to put in a little extra effort. But I was wrong. Some cracks aren't meant to be repaired. Some things, once shattered, can never be put back together. At first, I didn't want to see it. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was overthinking. It's what she said, too. You're being paranoid, she'd tell me with a sigh, like I was some overprotective idiot who didn't understand how trust worked. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the signs were there. It started small. Too small to call proof, too big to ignore. We'd been married for nearly 10 years. I knew her habits, her moods, the way she laughed at dumb reality shows while sipping her tea at night. I knew the way she curled up next to me in bed, the little way she'd nudge me with her foot when she wanted me to hold her. But somewhere along the way, those things changed. She stopped watching those shows, claiming she had better things to do. She started staying up later than me, always on her phone. She nudged me less and less. And then, one night, she stopped completely. I told myself it was stress, maybe work pressure. But then there were the sudden new habits, a new gym routine when she had never cared about working out before, dressing differently, a new perfume she had forgotten to mention buying. The biggest red flag? The phone. She never used to care if I grabbed her phone to check the weather or play a quick game while mine was charging. But now it was glued to her hand. She took it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. One night, while we were watching a movie, I reached for it absent-mindedly. "What are you doing?" she asked sharply, yanking it away before I could even touch the screen. "I was just checking the time," I said. "There's a clock right there," she snapped, nodding at the TV screen. I felt stupid, embarrassed, even. But mostly, I felt suspicious. I let it go. For a while. But then there were the late nights. She started coming home later than usual, always with some excuse. Work ran late. I stopped for coffee with some coworkers. I had a gym class. There was never a call, never a heads up, never an invitation for me to join her. I tested the waters one day. "Hey, maybe I'll swing by after work and we can grab dinner before your gym class." She stiffened, just for a second. A barely there hesitation. Then, she forced a laugh. "Ugh, babe, no. It's a women's-only class. You'd hate it." Maybe I would have believed her. If she didn't smell like cologne when she got home that night. The night I knew something was seriously wrong, she wasn't home when I woke up. I work early mornings, up by 5, out the door by 6. I always wake up before her. But this time, when I rolled over, her side of the bed was cold. Her car was still gone. She hadn't come home. My stomach twisted. But I told myself there had to be a reason. Maybe she stayed with a friend. Maybe there was a work emergency. But when she finally walked through the door at 7 in the morning, her makeup smudged, her hair slightly messy, and the same clothes she had worn the night before still on her body, I knew. I knew. She paused in the doorway when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table, my coffee in hand, my face unreadable. "Oh," she said, startled. "You're up early." I stared at her. "Where were you?" She blinked, as if the question surprised her. She glanced down at her phone like she was searching for an excuse. "I crashed at Julia's. I told you. Remember? We had a girls' night." I knew she was lying. I knew it in my gut. But I didn't call her out. Not yet. Instead, I nodded, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "Right. Julia's." Her shoulders relaxed. She thought she had gotten away with it. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight with her. I wasn't going to accuse her outright and watch her twist the truth into some version that made me look crazy. I was going to find proof. Because the next time she lied to me, I wanted to watch her squirm when she realized she had no way out. And then, I'd be the one walking away. The moment I decided to stop questioning her and start watching her, everything became painfully clear. She had been playing me for a fool. For months, I had been trying to rationalize her behavior, convincing myself that I was imagining things. But that morning, when she walked in smelling like cheap hotel soap, wearing the same wrinkled clothes as the night before, I realized something. She wasn't even trying that hard to hide it anymore. Maybe she thought I was too stupid to catch on. Maybe she thought I'd never leave her. Maybe she thought she had me so wrapped around her little finger that I would fight for her even after she spat in my face. She was wrong. I started gathering proof immediately. I wasn't going to confront her with suspicions. I wasn't going to let her turn this into one of those fights where she twisted the truth so much I started questioning myself. No, I needed hard evidence. Something she couldn't weasel her way out of. The first step? tracking patterns. She had already given me her biggest tell, her late nights and unexplained absences. So I started keeping notes. Every day, I jotted down the time she left, the time she got home, her excuse, and whether or not it made sense. Spoiler alert, it never made sense. One Friday, she told me she was having a last-minute dinner with coworkers. She left at 6:30 p.m. and didn't return until almost 2 a.m. She claimed they had lost track of time. The next week, she had yoga class. It ended at 8 p.m. She came home at midnight. When I casually mentioned looking up the class schedule, she flipped out. "What? You don't trust me," she snapped. And that was all I needed to hear. The second step? Surveillance. Now, before you think I went full detective mode, let me be clear. I didn't hire a private investigator. I didn't tail her around town with binoculars. All I did was use her own habits against her. I placed a cheap voice recorder in her car, tucked it neatly under the passenger seat, hidden where she wouldn't notice. It was simple, a device that could record for hours and pick up conversations when she was driving. And then, I waited. 3 days later, I had all the proof I needed. That night, she came home flustered. Her face was slightly pink, her hair a mess, her breathing just a little too off. I didn't say a word. I simply greeted her like normal, kissed her on the cheek, which she flinched at, and went to bed. At 3 a.m., when she was dead asleep, I retrieved the recorder. I played the first few minutes back, expecting to hear her singing along to the radio or talking on speakerphone. Instead, I heard a man's voice. Not just any man. The man she was screwing. I didn't know his name yet, but I recognized the tone. Cocky. Self-assured. The kind of guy who thinks he's invincible. They talked about me. How she had to be careful. How she thought I was starting to suspect something. How she wished I wasn't so boring and that she could just leave. But divorce is messy, and he's still useful. Still useful. I sat there in the dark, staring at the glowing screen of the recorder, feeling something inside me snap. She had already checked out of our marriage. She was just keeping me around as a safety net. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. If she wanted out, I was going to give her exactly that. But on my terms. The third step? Playing my hand. The next morning, over breakfast, I acted completely normal. She did too. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't been in a car with another man, discussing how much of a loser I was while cheating on me. I stirred my coffee, taking my time before looking up at her. "Oh, by the way," I said casually, "I spoke to a lawyer yesterday." Her spoon froze midair. "What?" she said, blinking. "Yeah," I nodded. "I figured we should probably start the divorce process now. The papers should be ready by Friday." I took a sip of my coffee, watching the blood drain from her face. "Divorce?" she echoed, like she hadn't been expecting this. I had to bite back a laugh. She looked genuinely panicked, like the realization had just hit her that this was actually happening. She dropped her spoon into her bowl. "Wait, you're serious?" I nodded. Completely. She let out a shaky breath, staring at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. I expected her to deny everything, to cry, to make excuses, to tell me I was overreacting. But instead, she whispered something that nearly made me laugh out loud. "You're supposed to fight for me." Fight for her. Like I was supposed to beg her to stay. Like I was supposed to act like this was a test, and my job was to prove I still wanted her. She expected tears. She expected pleading. She expected me to chase her like some lovesick fool. Not this time. I pushed my chair back, grabbed my coffee, and walked out of the room, leaving her there, staring after me, finally realizing she had just lost the one person who ever truly gave a damn about her. She had never looked at me like that before, like a woman drowning, realizing too late that she was the one who jumped into the deep end. For months, she had played this game, lying to my face, sneaking around like I was some clueless fool. She had assumed she had all the power, that I would never leave her. But when I told her the divorce papers would be ready by Friday, when I stood up and walked away, the mask finally cracked. She wasn't expecting indifference. She wasn't expecting me to be so calm, because that meant I had already let go of her. She tried to recover, of course. They always do. The next morning, I woke up to her cooking breakfast. Bacon, eggs, toast, the whole show. She hadn't made me breakfast in years. "Morning, babe," she said, forcing a smile. "I thought I'd make us something nice today." I stood there, staring at the table, then at her. I almost laughed. "Oh, so now you remember how to be a wife?" Her face twitched. I didn't sit down. I didn't touch the food. Instead, I grabbed a protein bar from the pantry and walked right past her. She hated that. I could feel her watching me, waiting for me to crack, to soften. I didn't. That night, she tried seduction. She walked into our bedroom wearing lingerie she hadn't worn in years. Her hand trailed along my arm. "I don't want us to rush into anything," she whispered. "Maybe we can talk first?" I looked down at her hand, then at her face. I could see the desperation lurking beneath her eyes. "You don't have to do this," I said, my voice flat. "Whatever you think you're saving is already gone." She pulled away like I had slapped her. "Well," she crossed her arms, her jaw tightening. "You're really going through with this, aren't you?" I turned back to my laptop, scrolling through my emails. "Yeah, I am." She stood there for a long time, waiting for me to look at her again. I didn't. She left the room, slamming the door behind her. The next phase? Denial and blame. By Wednesday, the understanding wife act was dead. She turned cold. Ruthless. "You're making a mistake," she hissed at me that morning. "You're throwing away our marriage over some stupid misunderstanding." I looked at her, unamused. "Misunderstanding?" I scoffed. "You mean the months you spent screwing someone behind my back?" Her face flushed, but she recovered quickly. "It wasn't like that." I smirked. "Oh, it wasn't? So tell me, was it only emotional cheating? Were you just friends?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Because if that's the case, I'd be happy to play the audio from your car. You know, the one where you called me boring and said you wished you could leave but didn't want to deal with a messy divorce." Her eyes widened. I nodded. "Yeah, that's what I thought." Her panic was instant. You spied on me?" I let out a short laugh. "Spied? No. I just stopped ignoring reality." She didn't know what to say. For months, she had been lying straight to my face, thinking she had me wrapped around her finger. Now she realized I wasn't playing her game anymore. She had lost control, and she hated it. That night, she cried. Not because she was sorry, because she was scared. I found her sitting on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, staring at nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't want to lose you." I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You should have thought about that before you cheated." She wiped her nose, shaking her head. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. You're supposed to fight for me." I felt nothing. "No, I'm not." Her face crumbled. For months, she had been making choices. She chose to lie. She chose to cheat. She chose to disrespect me. And now? She was finally facing the consequences. On Thursday, she got desperate. She called her mother, then my parents, then our mutual friends. She spun the story into something different. I was being cold. I was abandoning our marriage without a fight. I was letting a misunderstanding destroy us. The manipulation was textbook. The next morning, I got a call from her best friend, Melanie. "You're making a mistake," she started immediately. She told me what's happening. "You need to calm down and talk this through." I chuckled. "Oh, she told you, huh?" Melanie hesitated. "She said you're being irrational, that you're trying to throw everything away over nothing." I rolled my eyes. "Did she also tell you that she's been screwing some guy behind my back for months?" Silence. Then, "Wait, what?" I smirked. "Yeah, that's what I thought." By Friday morning, she had run out of tricks. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, pale, exhausted. The divorce papers sat between us, waiting for her signature. She didn't move, didn't speak. She just stared at them. And for the first time in months, she looked like she truly understood what she had done. She had spent all this time assuming she had control, assuming I would fight for her, assuming I would beg her to stay. But instead, I had done the one thing she never expected. I let her go. Without tears. Without begging. Without another damn thought. I slid a pen across the table. "Sign them," I said. I watched as she stared at the divorce papers, the weight of reality finally crashing down on her. She had spent months lying to me, sneaking around, assuming she had me so thoroughly wrapped around her finger that she could do whatever she wanted, and I would just take it. And now? Now she was out of tricks. Her hands trembled as she picked up the pen, hovering over the signature line. But she didn't sign. Instead, she looked up at me. Her eyes were red, desperate. "I don't want this," she whispered. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "You should have thought about that before you cheated." Her lip quivered. I was confused. "I made a mistake." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "A mistake." I repeated. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. A mistake is missing an important date. You spent months sneaking around behind my back. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. She flinched like I had hit her. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not fear of losing me. Fear of losing control. She tried everything. First, she begged. I'll do anything, she whispered, reaching for my hand. I'll cut him off. I'll prove it to you. Just please, don't do this. I pulled my hand away. It's already done. She gasped, like she hadn't expected me to be this far gone. Like she hadn't expected me to actually mean it. Then, she turned it around on me. Why didn't you fight for me? She hissed. I arched an eyebrow. Fight for what? A woman who betrayed me. Her hands curled into fists. People work through things like this all the time. You're just looking for an excuse to leave me. I scoffed. Oh, so now this is my fault? She doubled down. Yes. You let this happen. You checked out of this marriage before I ever did. I shook my head, laughing bitterly. That's funny. Because last time I checked, I wasn't the one screwing someone else. Her face twisted in frustration. Maybe if you had been a better husband, I wouldn't have needed to. Silence. Her breath hitched. She realized too late that she had just said too much. I let the moment stretch, my gaze never wavering from hers. Then I smiled. There it is. She swallowed hard, panic flashing across her face. I didn't mean. You meant it. My voice was calm, steady. You cheated because you wanted to. Because you thought you could. Because you thought I'd never leave you. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I stood up and pushed the papers toward her. Signed them. She burst into tears. She spent the rest of the night trying to wear me down. She cried, begged, screamed, tried to make me feel guilty. This isn't fair. I made one mistake, and you're throwing away our entire life together. This isn't just about us. What about our families? What will they think? I can't believe you're giving up on us so easily. None of it worked. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. By morning, she changed tactics again. She called my mother. My son deserves better, Mom said flatly when she called me. Let her drown in her own mess. She called my best friend. She's full of it, man, he texted me. Stay strong. She even tried calling her affair partner. And that? That was the biggest mistake she could have made. Because he didn't answer. She tried 4 times. Then 5. Then 6. When I walked into the kitchen that afternoon, she was gripping her phone so hard I thought she might break it. Something wrong? I asked, smirking. She lifted her head, her expression dark. He's ignoring me. I nodded. Of course he is. She scowled. What the hell does that mean? I shrugged. It means what it means. You were fun while you were forbidden. Now that you're free, you're just baggage. Her face crumpled. She had gambled everything, our marriage, our home, her reputation, on a man who didn't even want her beyond stolen moments. And now? She had nothing. Not him. Not me. Not even a shred of dignity. That night, she finally broke. The realization had settled in. I wasn't going to forgive her. I wasn't going to fight for her. I wasn't going to save her from her own mess. So she signed the papers. She didn't speak. Didn't look at me. Just signed. And when she slid them back across the table, her hands still shaking, she whispered, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. I met her eyes, steady and unflinching. Not my problem. I grabbed the papers and walked away. The divorce was official. She had signed the papers, handed over the last shred of control she thought she had over me, and watched in silence as I walked away. For the first time in months, I was free. And she? She was about to learn exactly what it felt like to lose everything. It started with the realization that she had nowhere to go. After signing, she sat in the living room for hours, staring at nothing, probably waiting for me to change my mind. She still didn't get it. By the next morning, I had already made arrangements. I wanted her out. You need to pack your things, I said, standing in the doorway. Her head snapped up, eyes swollen from crying. Wait, you're actually kicking me out. I almost laughed. Did you think I was going to let you stay? She scoffed, shaking her head. This is my house, too. No, it's not. I crossed my arms. I spoke to my lawyer. The mortgage? The deed? Both in my name. You never put a cent into this house. You wanted me to be the provider? Congratulations, you get nothing. Her mouth fell open. You wouldn't do that. I smirked. I already did. Her panic was instant. She started grabbing at straws. Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged. Not my problem. What about my stuff? I'll have it packed up for you. Her eyes burned with fury. You're being heartless. No, I said evenly. I'm being done. That shut her up. Then came the social fallout. She must have thought she could control the narrative, spin the divorce into some tragic story where I was the villain, and she was the poor, misunderstood wife who just needed more. But there was one problem. Everyone knew the truth. Her best friend cut her off. My mother told the entire family exactly what she had done. Our mutual friends, they chose me. And her affair partner, he never called her again. A week later, she tried reaching out. A text, then another. At first, she played it cool. I miss you. Can we talk? I left her on read. Then, she tried guilt. I hate how things ended. Don't you feel anything? We were together for 10 years. Still read. Then, she turned nasty. You were never man enough to keep me anyway. That's why I cheated. I smiled at the screen. Blocked. She didn't deserve my energy. She didn't deserve a response. She didn't deserve me. I moved on. She crumbled. A few months later, I ran into one of our old friends. She's a mess, he told me. Lost her apartment. Moved back in with her mom. Looks like she's barely holding it together. I didn't feel bad. Not even a little. She made her choices. And now, she was living with the consequences. 1 year later, I sat on my new apartment balcony, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise. I had spent the last year rebuilding my life, my confidence, my happiness. And I had never felt lighter. My phone buzzed. A message from someone new. Someone who actually respected me. Someone who wasn't a liar. I smiled. I had won. And she had lost everything.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.